I have to tell you about Kenny Reardon. Kenny Reardon, he was my absolute hero of all time. I'll tell you how much I thought of Kenny Reardon. In the old days, they'd have a newsreel, and they had a picture of Kenny Reardon, and he used to run on his skates. I think he ran for about 5 seconds, and I started watching this movie over and over again. He was my hero of all time. And when I became pro, I played against his brother Terry, and he played for Providence. And so I played a couple of years against Terry and everything like that. And I never forgot the time I got with the Montreal organization, and I was sitting on the bench. And he come up behind me, and I was sitting. The guy standing beside me, I think it was Gary Bergman, and he was playing for Montreal. And it was great in Montreal how they used to mix everybody, the confirmed minor leaguers like me with everything like that. So he come up, and Kenny come up behind me and tapped me on the back, and he says, "Welcome to the club, Don. I'm glad." They were so classy. And I said, "Thanks very much." When he walked away, my hero come up to me and talked to me. And Gary Bergman says, "I wouldn't do that again if I were you, Don." And I said, "Well, why? That was my hero, Kenny Reardon." He says, "No, you called him Terry. My hero of heroes, and I had to call him Terry."
Well, we have a clip of Kenny talking about his feud with Cal Gardner. And after the clip, we'll talk about it. But you wanted to talk about this because you went and saw the movie 1917.
1917, and that was the First World War. And I want to talk about Kenny Reardon in the Second World War. He absolutely fantastic. He was a hero. He was a dispatch writer, and he got a letter of commendation from the Queen about it. And naturally, he wouldn't say it. I'm saying it right now. But it reminded me of the First World War, that movie 1917. That's a beauty.
Well, anyway, we got a clip here now of Kenny Reardon. So we did this in the Grapevine around 1990. And so let's listen to Kenny Reardon right now.
Let's talk about, we had Cal Gardner on here.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we got to talk about it. Now, tell us what happened between you and Cal in New York.
Well, how much time have we got?
Well, let's take lots of time. This is a goodie.
We were playing the Rangers, and we were playing for first place. The previous game we'd played there, Dick Irvin put me out in the last minute to play, and I had iced the puck. And the face-off came back in our end of the rink, and consequently we lost the draw, and they beat us 3-2. So this game we're tied, and the tie is good enough for us to finish in first place, which we want desperately. So Dick said, "Over you go, Reardon," with a minute to go, and he said, "And don't do what you did the last time." So I'm on the ice there, and the face-off's in our end of the rink, and I'm standing there, and I'm saying, "Oh, I hope the face-off doesn't come to me. I hope it doesn't come to me." But sure enough, it came to me. Yeah. So I said, "Oh, I got to get this puck out of here, and I can't shoot it because the coach will kill me if I do." So I was against the boards, so I started just pushing it along the boards with my head down. I was just, in other words, just bullying the puck. Get it out of here. So I just, like, the head down, I passed one pair of blue stockings, which was Rangers. I passed another pair, and I could see the blue line about 5 feet ahead of me. I said, if I get it that far, I've got it over the blue, and we're out of trouble. And with that, a stick came up with 2 gloves right there, and bang, back I went. And that was Mr. Gardner.
How much did you get here?
I got 29 stitches in my lip. I had 2 front teeth knocked out, and the sorest thing was I had 9 stitches put in under my tongue. Ooh. And you know, when they don't freeze you,
never froze them in those days.
No. But so that was the start of the Gardner.
That's a pretty good start.
Well, being Irish. Being Irish, I thought it would only be right if I got even.
Yes.
But I didn't want to do anything as dirty as what he would do.
Oh, I know.
Nothing. So about a year later, we were playing Toronto and Montreal, and I was carrying the puck. And I accidentally ran into Cal, and his jaw got broken on both sides.
By accident? Just by accident. I was just... Now, Mr. Campbell got after you, right?
Well, I had issued a an article in
In
a
this
magazine, in
mag-
that magazine
yeah.
there, and I was getting near the end of my career, and the writer was a friend of mine. He said, well, Kenny, you've had a good career. He said, is there anything you'd like to do before you finish playing hockey? And this was in June.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there having a Molson, and I said, yeah, the one thing I'd like to do before I finish playing, I'd like to get even with Cal Gardner. So you'd make those stories in June, and they're published later on. You don't know when they're coming out. Well, it just happened to be published the same week as I ran into Cal Gardner. So there was a great sports writer in Toronto called Milt Donnell.
Oh, sure,
And
still here, great guy.
He picked that up like a hawk. And he got onto the phone to Clarence Campbell, and he said, Mr. Campbell, what kind of a league are you running? He said, here's a player says he's going to get another player, and he did it last week. What are you going to do about it? So Mr. Campbell called me down for a nice little talk.
Yeah, he was good at that.
Oh, we had a nice talk, and I said, boy, he sounds mad to me. I said, I think I'm going to get fined $100. And he was kept on going, and I said, oh boy, I think this is going to cost $250. And then he was still going. I said, oh, I think this is going to cost $500. So then he said, well, Kenny, he said, I think there's only one thing I'm going to do with you. And he said, I am going to put a bond on you that you'll never touch Cal Gardner again. So I said, oh, but he said, and the bond will be $1,000. I nearly fell out of my chair. I
What?
said, holy smokes.
Well, tell us what you were making then, $1,000.
Well, I was in those days in the $10,000, $12,000 category.
That'd be like $100,000 for
I
Gretzky.
posted the bond, and I never touched him again.
Well,
I think if I'd played one more year, I would have gladly paid the $1,000.
Now, I want to get in. The war came along and you went to war. Tell us about that.
My brother played for Boston Bruins.
Jerry?
I played for Montreal, and we decided that we would both go overseas. So I had played 2 years. He'd played 3 years. So we both volunteered for the Army, and we went overseas. And before we went overseas, the Canadian Army formed a team in Ottawa of soldiers, and because the Air Force had a team the year before and they won the Allen Cup, they had Schmidt, Bauer, and Dumart. So the Army was competing with the Air Force. They formed a hockey team. So we had an Army hockey team, and we won the Allen Cup. And then after that, I went overseas because there was no reason to go overseas because of the invasion.
You're being pretty modest. You won a certificate of gallantry and the whole thing. Here's what. Tell us about this picture.
Well, this is the final of the Canadian Championship in England. We played over there, and this is a very interesting picture, because that's Field Marshal Montgomery, who was the top soldier.
I guess so.
Connie Smythe brought him to the final game in Brighton. That's me on the left, and that's Captain Hall. The other fellow is Gordon Poirier, who was probably one of the best exports we ever had to England. He was an English star. He and the LeMay. And the other fellow is Dickie Milford. You must know his brother Jake.
Yeah, oh, Jake, I guess.
That's his young brother.
Terry played on the other team, right?
He played for Winnipeg, and I played for this team here, and the referee was Clarence Campbell.
Oh,
so,
your old friend.
Yes.
And Monty remembered your name.
Well, as you can see, I'm the first being introduced in this line.
Yeah.
Introduced to General Montgomery, and I said, how do you do, sir? And he went all the way down the line shaking hands with our team. He crossed the ice, and he went all the way down the line with the other team, and my brother was the last one on the other team. And they said, this is Lieutenant Reardon, General. And he said, Reardon? He said, there's a Reardon on the other team. So I think it's a wonderful...
Absolutely. He was a great man, and you're a great man.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kenny. We're going to go over to the bar later, right over there.
So let me ask you, Dad, when these players, and there was a lot of players in those days that went over and fought. Yeah. So when they came back, him and his brother, did they continue on with their NHL career?
They sure did. And right in the middle of the career, someday we'll go through all the players that went over in the middle of the career. Yeah, Terry and Kenny Reardon went over right in the prime time of their careers and spent 2 years in the Army. I don't know if we do that now. Anyhow,
well, you were saying that Doug Orr, Bobby Orr's dad, went over. He was supposed to be a very good hockey player.
Doug Orr, they said, could skate as good or if not better than Bobby Orr, which has really said something. And he spent 5 years on a Corvette. Now, the Corvette is a small destroyer, and they were made in Canada, and they were like a cork. And he spent 5 years, and naturally, when he came back, 5 years. I imagine spending 5 years on a Corvette, and what he did in the North Atlantic, he was the convoy back and forth and everything like that.
Well, those guys didn't have a big survival rate.
No,
Those Corvette guys. They were, as you say, they were almost kind of like the in between the U-boats and the supply ships.
And they were made in Canada. Not that that's anything wrong being made in Canada, but they were like a cork out there. And he spent 5 years on it. And same as Kenny, these guys spent right in the middle of their career. And we must talk about the Kraut line, as they call it. We must talk about them when right in the middle of the career. But actually, Kenny Reardon got, as I said before, got a letter of commendation and was a dispatch writer, which was really one of the most dangerous jobs in the Second World War because they could be picked off, like they had to deliver messages and everything like that. This movie reminded me of Kenny Reardon, my hero. And it's a funny thing. I used to go to bed every night looking at this picture, and it was him sitting on the bench with a beautiful picture of him. And I used to look and I said, let me be like Kenny Reardon. And he gave me that picture, and I have it on the wall right now. I never forgot how lucky I am.
Well, we were doing it we did this in the early 90s, and we did Kenny first. And so the show was over, and he came up to me and says, thanks very much, Tim. He says, you getting Cal on? And I says, well, as a matter of fact, we got him on in a couple of weeks. He says, when it's over, I want you to call me, tell me what he said about me. And I said, oh, okay. And then Cal came on, and he said, before the show, he says, I heard you had Kenny Reardon on. He said, what did he say about me? I said, oh, didn't say anything really. He says, you just, said that you hit him with the stick and you got, well, no, what did he say? Can I see the tape? Like they were still mad at each other. How many years later they were still like, if you put them in the same room, they might have went at it.
What's the funny thing is, now that I think about it, and then you're talking about it, that when Cal, he broke his jaw, and he was imagine breaking his jaw. Like I said, he was a great guy, but Cal was a good guy too. And Cal met the nurse, and that the nurse was his wife, who he married later on. So actually, Kenny Reardon did a great thing for Cal.